Welcome to the January 2026 Sharp Information Session, where we invite speakers to offer information sessions about resources, services, and tools available to help English-speaking older adults to age in the right place. So my name is Megan Yang. I'm the Program Administrative Assistant for Seniors and also for the SHARP program here at CHSSN. I thank all of the Quebec English-speaking community organizations and the SHARP coordinators and older adults who are with us today, whose efforts have resulted in such a beautiful turnout. I'm really happy with how many people we have here today for this topic. And if you have any questions about the presentation or the resources that are going to be mentioned today, please contact the organization that invited you. So today we have Marissa Norton here with us to discuss the simple active listening tools that help strengthen relationships and reduce social isolation amongst older adults and practical ways for us to create meaningful conversations, build connection in everyday interactions, and support one another with empathy. Marissa Norton is the executive director at Ventover T. Although her background is in communications, she is a trained active listener, has completed CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy training for personal development, and is an advocate for mental health awareness and emotional literacy. Marissa has facilitated multiple active listening workshops with businesses, schools, and other community organizations. So, Marissa, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Today, we're going to be looking at active listening and how it could be a tool for reducing social isolation. We're going to do a quick little introduction. Megan already kind of introduced me, so I could probably skip my intro slide, maybe give a little extra context. And then we're going to do a little reflection icebreaker activity. Now, we don't really have the availability to have like chat, or not chat, voice chat during the presentation. So this is more just like an inner reflection to help you, you know, stand where we are in terms of the presentation. We're going to take a look at understanding isolation and how loneliness can contribute to that, and how they kind of play together. We're going to look at ways, small ways to that connection matters and how to kind of bring those up to the surface a little bit more, practice them a little bit more intentionally, to help break that isolation. And then we're also going to look at how active listening deepens those relationships. So, I always like to add with these workshops is that I think most of us have the ability of active listening. I think it's a skill that a lot of us have in us. We want to have these great connections. We want to be able to show people that we understand, and we want to show people that we're listening. So I'm not going to go too deep into like every single aspect of active listening, but more just a general overview and how you can take those skills that you probably already have and bring them to the forefront for those conversations. So just to add a little bit more about me, I'm from Hudson, Quebec. It's a small town, a small community just near the border of Ontario. I come from a background, like Megan said, in communications, but I'm really passionate about mental health. When I was living in Quebec, I actually worked at a pharmacy for as a lab technician for about 8 years. So I was interacting pretty much every day, with older adults and older populations and trying to have those really great conversations so that it wasn't just, coming in, getting your medication and leaving. I wanted to make people feel connected, and it really was a great place to have those moments. I've been with Ventover Tea for about 6 years in various roles. And just a little bit more about Ventover Tea, just to kind of contextualize why I'm doing this workshop. We're a mental health association or a nonprofit that offers free active listening services to the community, virtually across the province or really across Canada, and as well as in person in Montreal, Sherbrooke, or the Estuary region, and the West Island. Our goal really is to help people feel heard so that no one is unheard and that people have a sense of community and that we're able to support one another and have those great connections. We're about 10 years old. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year. And our three main programs is our active listening program, our event program, and our workshop program. And this is part of that is we provide workshops. So I just want to take a moment and give everyone a chance to think about this. And I want you to think about a time where you felt truly heard by somebody and how that made you feel. Think of that time where somebody gave you 100% of their undivided attention and was really trying to understand you and connect with you and show that they heard you and that they validated you. And I want you to think about those emotions that you felt. If you'd like, you can write them in the chat. But I just want to kind of have that feeling in our hearts while we're doing this workshop, because that's really the goal. We want to try and bring that sense, that feeling to our everyday conversations, whether it's in a very, very small way or in a larger way with maybe some of our more personal relationships. But I want to kind of keep that in mind as we're going through it. So I'll just take a moment. If anyone wants to throw it in the chat, great. I'll have a sip of my tea before we dive in. I felt elated, relief. I love those words. Reassurance. Connected. Heard, safe, validated. Safe again. Yeah, these are wonderful. Respected, surprised, good, good about ourselves, supported, valued as a caregiver. I had a social bond. So yeah, I think like we understand the value of these connections because of the feeling that we felt during these moments. So we're going to take a look at social isolation and what it really means, and how loneliness paired with it can be, a bit of a dangerous situation or a risky situation that we want to try to avoid or limit as much as possible. So social isolation is when you have fewer social contacts or opportunities to connect with others, whether you want it or not. Um, it could take on many different forms. It could be you're feeling isolated physically. Maybe you're in a location where you don't have that strong sense of community. You don't have those interactions every day with people. It could be isolation in terms of not feeling connected with your community. Maybe there is a lot of stuff happening around you, but you don't have those moments where you feel like you're able to connect either because things just don't gel well together. Maybe you're limited in certain aspects. It could also mean isolation in terms of your resources, right? And it could also feel like things where maybe you're not feeling heard by your family and friends or your community around you. You don't feel understood or listened to. You're feeling disconnected in everyday spaces. Social isolation really can foster a sense of loneliness that can get to a point where there can be some serious physical and mental health disadvantages. So, loneliness isn't necessarily being alone. Some of us choose to be alone at certain aspects of our lives. I love being alone on a Saturday reading a book. That does not mean that I'm lonely. Um, Loneliness is that sense of being alone, disconnected, or not close to others, and feeling that emotional disconnect, right? Um, so we're trying to avoid those two coming together and also both of them existing on their own. But there are some pretty significant impacts that social isolation can bring to us as individuals and to our communities. So we're going to take a quick look at the impact of social isolation. So, like I said, it can have a pretty significant impact on both our physical and mental well-being. I was reading a research report, and this was from 2012, I believe, where they said that social isolation and loneliness can increase the risk of death equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's a pretty significant risk. It could also increase the risk of heart disease, stroke, mental health issues like anxiety, depression, dementia. There's a lot of ways that social isolation can impact us on our everyday lives. So it's really important to try to find those moments of connection, whether they're small or large, so that we can kind of support ourselves. A few other stats here about social isolation is people age 65 in Quebec feel always or often lonely. About 14% of them have reported that. And it goes up to 26% when they say sometimes. So a quarter of our population, of our aging population, feels lonely sometimes. And it can come from a whole bunch of different factors. It can come from living alone. It could be physical isolation in terms of location. It could be the loss of a spouse or a loved one. There could be financial limitations that are stopping you from being able to have more meaningful conversations and more meaningful connections. Mobility comes into play, health changes. There's so many different factors that affect us baseline as humans to kind of support social isolation, but also it does contribute a lot higher when we're looking at the aging population or older adults because of additional factors like that. 1 in 5 seniors report loneliness across Canada. It's a pretty significant number. And elderly people who suffer from loneliness are 64% more likely to develop dementia. And that's a stat from Canada as well. So pretty jarring statistics to look at. And there are lots of ways that we can help reduce social isolation, both as a community, but also as individuals. And we're going to be looking at what you can do as an individual, or if you're here attending this workshop as a caregiver to support an individual, how can we kind of build those connections a little bit further? So, one of the big takeaways from this workshop is I really want to emphasize that small moments really can make a big difference. It's great if you have these really strong, trusting, long-standing relationships, either with family or friends or specific community members. Those are always fantastic and they're very important. But a lot of us don't have that access or don't have those opportunities. Maybe we are more isolated from our family and friends, so we don't see them as often. Maybe we don't have a lot of that around us just due to our age or because of our communities. So these small interactions really add up in the long run. These are kind of the great bite-sized elements in our everyday lives that can really help develop a stronger base for connection and reduce social isolation. So seeing the value in these small interactions, whether it's, having a tiny conversation with the grocer, the cashier at the grocery store, having a little interaction with the delivery person, having an interaction with your community organizers, um, smiling at a barista and having a little moment there. These are tiny little moments that help us feel more human and feel more connected, and they really go a long way. So I really want to emphasize that they are not, yeah, sometimes it's just to share a smile. Having that tiny moment can really make a big difference, especially if we're facing social isolation. Um, I can just say from my own experience, during COVID, for example, social isolation was at an all-time high. It was really hard to find those moments because we only had virtual things. And they're great. They're really fantastic. But I was really craving an interaction with a human face to face. And I remember when Maxi introduced food deliveries to the house and the courier came, and I was so excited to see a physical human in front of me. I like started having a conversation with them and we ended up talking for 15 minutes. I felt so bad because he definitely had other deliveries to do, but you could tell that the two of us just really wanted to have a chat. And it was a really great interaction and it helped me in that moment. So making time for those and really appreciating those can, like I said, go a very long way. Um, and why did these small interactions work? They really remind us that we're seen and valued. They build trust, especially with more of a long-standing relationship. They invite more conversations in the future. If you're somebody who is either shy or more introverted, and maybe the idea of like sparking a conversation with a stranger is very difficult, um, starting with a small step, a smile, a wave, a nod, and then working your way up can help you feel more comfortable with those conversations and help kind of build that connection a little bit bigger. So like I said, the ways to achieve this, there's so many different ways to achieve this, and I would love for people to share their ideas as well. But really make the time, put the effort, and just feel free to kind of connect with people at a very basic level, whether it's a smile or a nod or a tiny conversation about how their day is going. A compliment really goes a long way and it'll come back to you. Um, Try to kind of put yourself in a more vulnerable position in that aspect. So these are just a few examples, and I would really love for you to add some more in the chat, but here's just a few that I identified. So make time for small talks, trying a new hobby. The community organizations that you invited you to this, they have a lot of programming. They have a lot of really great services and events and workshops and opportunities for you to try new things, spark new conversations. So take a look at their offerings and see. Maybe there's a local gym that you can attend. Maybe there's a walking group at the park nearby. Um, Group lunches, I love that idea. Asking questions. If you're at the grocery store and somebody is wearing a really cool necklace, asking them where that necklace is from, complimenting it, that kind of sparks a conversation. It doesn't have to be a personal conversation about the deepest, darkest parts of their lives, but those tiny little things can really help people feel connected and it'll come back to you, like I said. Try to connect with those immediately around you. If you are in an apartment complex and you're grabbing your mail, having a little conversation with your neighbor. attending virtual events like this. This is a connection moment. We're all together virtually in a room. I could see lots of your faces. I can connect with you in the chat. We can talk in the Q&A later. I'm feeling connected with everybody, and I hope that's the same. So these type of events are very helpful, especially if you have, the means to connect and do these types of events. I definitely recommend trying out as many as you can. And a lot of the organizations that support our communities, like I said, have these types of things. And then trying listening services. There's a ton of listening services across Quebec that are available to you. I'm a bit biased, Bent Over Tea is one of them. But there are a lot of other ones that are available to you. And really the goal there is to help you find a connection and support you, whether it's just talking about your day or if you want to talk about something a little bit more serious, they're available to you so that you could have that form of connection. So I can tell you a little bit more about active listening services and what they are. So it really depends on what type of service you're looking for. If you're looking for a service where you can just dial a phone number right away and be connected with a volunteer who's there to listen to you, there are a lot of services available for that. And they're either volunteer run or team run. And these people on the other line, they are trained to provide you with a safe space to kind of say whatever's on your mind. Like I said, whether it's how your day went, it could be venting about a neighbor putting their trash out at the wrong day of the week. It could be about something that's serious happening with your family or within yourself. It really could be anything that's on your mind. And they're there to kind of give you that space, help you talk through it if that's what you're looking for, and create a sense of that connection. So I can say from my experience with Vent Over Tea, our goal really is to just give you that moment. It's an hour. It's always free. And it's our listeners are trained in active listening, in empathetic regard, mental health first aid. And they're there to just kind of be that listening ear. The goal really is to be that to have that sense of like a friend that you can just talk to comfortably. It's not meant to be a clinical service. It's not meant to feel like you're talking to a therapist. It's meant to be that you're talking to a human one-on-one and they're there for you to support you. It's also a really great tool that if you don't necessarily have, an everyday person or people that you could talk to, it's a great way to kind of get out there and have engaging conversations and experience conversations with people you might never have connected with. Our service is available face to face or virtually face to face or on the phone. So you're meeting somebody new for the first time. They're a stranger, but they're to make you feel safe. And they might have a completely different experience from your own. They're not there to bring their experience and share it with you, but it can kind of help you talk through whatever's going on. So our service is volunteer run and they are not therapists. Some of them are in their own professional backgrounds, but they're not coming to this service to provide therapy. They can help you work through things by asking you questions, brainstorming solutions, kind of helping you understand maybe where you're coming from and how you're feeling about a situation, but they're not going to tell you what to do. They're not going to give you advice. They're not going to share their opinion on the situation. The goal really is to help you come to your own conclusions and feel supported in your own right. If you are looking for advice, then there's other services available for that. So that was on social isolation and loneliness. And we're going to kind of jump into active listening and the skills around it and how it could be a really powerful support. So, what is active listening? Um, Simply put, it's really listening with care. It's listening to understand versus listening to provide advice or your own opinions, or kind of bring in your own opinions. Really, at its core, it helps people feel valued and heard. So, like we saw at the beginning when I asked the icebreaker question, how did it feel when somebody really gave you that moment and made you feel heard? Everybody who was saying stuff, they felt safe, they felt trusted, they felt supported, they felt valued. That's what active listening does. It gives that person the space to make it fully of their own and give them that space to kind of vent and have a supporting person that isn't going to jump in with advice, isn't going to share their opinion. And it really helps create more meaningful conversations. Now, not every conversation needs to be an active listening conversation. You might be talking with somebody and they want your advice and they want you to kind of tell them how you feel about a situation, and there's great time for that. But sometimes, if you've ever let's say you've ever vented to somebody, you've complained about your day, you're having a really rough day, and that person on the other side of the table either minimized how you were feeling, or they brushed it to the side, or they said, well, at least, you did this thing instead. Um, More often than not, I could assume that you probably felt a bit dismissed, or you felt like that person wasn't really listening or caring. They just kind of wanted to move on. That's what we call passive listening. It's listening to react and kind of share how you feel about a situation. And then active listening is really if somebody takes that moment to put their feelings to the side and fully absorb how you're feeling about something and try to understand where you're coming from and support you. That's really the beauty of active listening. And everyday examples of this is listening to somebody talk about their day, letting a grandchild finish a story without cutting them off. I was having a conversation with a friend's parent who was saying, they're just so tired of their kid, their grandkid who's like 7 or 8, telling them about these stories that are just kind of long-winded and going on and on and on. And they're just like, yeah, okay. Um, it's a 7 or 8 year old. They might not understand the value of active listening, but having their grandparents sitting there and just absorbing it all and listening to them and being excited about the story, it goes a long way for them. They feel connected and you feel connected. Um, and then giving full attention to somebody on the phone. It's a bit harder to be, face to face on a phone, right? You can't show somebody physically that you're engaged and you're listening to them. But through the phone, you can, encourage them to go forward. You can support how they're feeling about a situation, and it really helps bring those conversations to life and connect. So, we've identified 3 components of active listening, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into them. But the first one is hearing, the second one is comprehending, and the third one is responding. Now, in your everyday connections, especially with these smaller moments, you might not need all 3 of these components, but there's definitely elements from each of them that you could probably bring into your everyday life. And that's really the goal of this workshop is to kind of give you those little tidbits that can help you create more meaningful conversations and connections with people. And also help you feel more connected to other people when they're engaging with you. If you're noticing that eye contact that somebody's giving you, if you're noticing that they're suspending judgment, if you're noticing that they're showing that they understand, you're understanding, oh, this person is actively listening to me and I feel valued. So it's kind of a nice two-way tool to have in your toolkit. So the first element is hearing. And we like to say this is hearing with your whole body. It's not just using your ears, right? It's showing eye contact, and connecting with that person physically to show them that you're listening. One of the ways that we do this is with our body language. And again, a lot of these things are things that you probably already do. But it's just nice to kind of take stock of them and see where they kind of align within active listening. So body language, when you're having a conversation with somebody, showing that you're open to the conversation physically, can really go a long way and kind of connect with that person, right? So if somebody's telling me about their day and they're sharing their frustration with it, and my arms are crossed, I'm kind of hunched forward, I'm looking the other way, I don't really seem that engaged, right? I seem like I'm kind of annoyed with the conversation or that I'm tired of it. Um, on my end, I might just be cold. I might just be comfortable in this position. This might be just my natural stance. But to the other person on the other side of the table, they might not see it that way. So being cognizant of that, having an open body language, my arms are uncrossed, my legs are uncrossed, I'm either leaning forward or I have an open position like this, it can show the other person that I'm engaged and that I'm willing to have the conversation. Another element of hearing is mirroring facial expressions. So this is something that I think a lot of people have naturally, where if someone's telling me a funny story, I'm usually smiling or I'm laughing along with them. I'm not frowning or have like a scowl on my face, because that shows disconnect, right? Or it shows judgment. It comes quite naturally to us. We, as humans, we kind of have this like baked into our DNA is to kind of mirror the people in front of us. But if it's something that maybe you don't do, or maybe you don't notice that you don't do, it's a tool to kind of help you connect with other people. And then the last part of hearing is paralanguage and minimal encouragers. So paralanguage, simply put, is the language of our body. So when somebody is telling us something and we want to encourage them to keep going, we're nodding, where maybe like doing this with our hands when we're talking with them. It's ways to show that you're engaged in conversation. And then minimal encouragers is those tiny little moments that maybe we don't even realize that we're doing that are kind of showing that we're engaged, that don't disrupt somebody. So if somebody's telling me a story and I say, "Oh, that's so exciting, tell me more." I'm kind of disrupting the flow of the conversation. It's still great to do to tell people, encourage them. But a way that you can do that minimally is things like, oh gosh, wow. Like it's not breaking the flow, but it is showing that you're listening and kind of following what's going on. The second element is comprehending. And this is where we're really doing a lot of internal work. As humans, we can kind of jump to conclusions quite quickly. We can be judgmental, especially when sometimes it can be fun to be a little judgy. And it's a bit harder when you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and you're trying to like really show them that you're there here for them. You don't want to have any judgment on your face or in your answers so that that person feels connected with you. Um, so the comprehending element is really suspending that judgment, putting your emotions and your feelings about the situation to the side and trying to approach your conversation with curiosity. Um, Even the slightest amount of judgment it could put a bit of a wall between you two. And it's not to say that that one moment of judgment, whether you don't realize you're doing it or not, is going to stop a whole conversation and ruin a relationship. But if you do it more often, it starts building brick by brick a wall in front of you and that person. So trying to avoid that as much as possible can be a really handy tool, um, to give that person that space and give yourself the space to try to understand where they're coming from and maybe learn something new about yourself or maybe something new about that person. Um, Comprehending is also practicing empathy. Now, empathy versus sympathy, they are two very different things. Empathy is really trying to understand somebody's point of view by understanding their feelings. It's putting yourself in that moment of how they're feeling about a situation and reflecting inwards about maybe a moment that made you feel that way, so that you can understand them better. A lot of times, the question about empathy is, well, I didn't experience that exact same thing. So how can I be empathetic versus sympathetic in that situation? Again, it's about the feeling. If somebody's telling you about something that happened to them, that is a very specific thing that happened to them, but they felt, from what you understood, worried or scared, for example, practicing empathy is going within and finding that place where you felt worried and scared and helping that bridge that connection between you and that other person and understanding their perspective. Um, Empathy on the other side is a bit more just at that surface level, kind of feeling bad for them. Maybe you're going to pair it with some compassionate work and do some help. Maybe you feel bad for them, but you're going to, go for a walk with them or something like that. That's a great thing to do. But empathy is really trying to understand where they're coming from and saying, you know, I'm so happy you shared this with me. I understand how you feel, and I'm here for you. Versus, I'm sorry, that sucks, and then moving forward. So when we're practicing active listening, we want to try and practice that empathy within ourselves and also with that person. And then the last element of active listening is responding. So when we're actively listening, we're not just sitting there like this, nodding. We're engaged in a conversation with them, but the conversation is focused on supporting that person and validating that person's experience. So when you jump in and you're starting to reflect and kind of talk with them, your goal really is to kind of show your understanding and help them feel like whatever is going on is normal and it's fine and they're allowed to feel this way and that they're valid for feeling this way. And that helps bring those connections to a bit more forward. So on your end, it's encouraging elaboration. Tell me more, go on. It's asking questions to help you understand a bit better, but also questions to help them understand a bit better. If somebody is talking to you about a conflict they're having with one of their kids, and you can kind of understand where they're coming from and you can understand their frustration and you're able to kind of see maybe the solution in the sky, but you don't necessarily want to tell them, here's what you got to do. trying to ask them questions that help them understand a little bit better can be really helpful. So asking them, let's say for example, you haven't your person that you're talking to hasn't seen their kids in a really long time. Maybe they live farther away and it's really affecting them. They've asked their kids if they were going to come see them, but they keep making excuses or they're busy. And you could see that that person is feeling dismissed. They're feeling like they're not prioritized by their kids, um, but they're not really sure how to approach the situation. Asking questions like, well, have you spoken to your kids about how this is affecting you, how you're feeling isolated? Do you feel like you have the support that you need? Have you talked to them about that? Maybe they haven't. Maybe they've just asked their kids, like, hey, are you coming over? And they say no. And then they're like, okay. And, it's not your job to fix things at all. But if you understand where they're coming from, asking those types of questions where it helps clarify the situation, both for you and that person, could really go a long way. It shows not only that person that you're listening and you understand and you're there to support them, but it also helps you understand a bit more their perspective and where things are coming from so that maybe if there's some judgment within you about that person, maybe it helps you kind of diminish that judgment. Um, a great tool is to try to avoid asking questions that can make somebody feel defensive. So, um, if just think about your own experience, if you were telling somebody about a situation and they asked you a question of like, well, why'd you do it that way? You feel a bit defensive about it and you feel a bit disconnected from that person, right? So, trying to avoid those questions, can be a helpful tool. And then the last part is paraphrasing. So this is a really great tool to show somebody that you understand what they're saying and that you're engaged in conversation. So paraphrasing really is just taking what they said, jumbling it up a little bit and repeating it back to them in a way that doesn't sound like you're like robotically repeating them, but that you're interpreting what they're saying and you're clarifying with them. So if somebody tells me, I'm so tired of my kids making excuses and they never want to come see me. It's so annoying. I would take that and I'd paraphrase and I'd say, it sounds like you don't feel like a priority and it's really weighing on you. Two different sentences, but the same exact sentiment. That person's gonna be like, you're so right. I totally like that's totally how I feel. Or they might say that's not how I feel, and then it helps them kind of understand their question. So those are just some tools that I think a lot of us have in our tool belt already, but just kind of contextualizing it in active listening, in how we can bring these to these moments to kind of help foster more connection. And again, if we're trying to find those small moments that add up, you might not have the responding element in your small conversation you have with the cashier at the grocery store. That might not come into play, but eye contact will. Um, Asking a question might come into play. Showing some empathy about a situation might come into play. So just think about those little elements and how you can bring them into your everyday life, to help you break that social isolation.
Is it okay to say to someone that I can't imagine how you feel about this regarding some of the approaches to responding when using active listening?
Totally. Yeah, that is a great response. I think pairing it with a supportive sentence like, I can't imagine how you feel about this, but I'm just so happy that you told me I'm here for you. It shows the person that maybe you might not be able to fully understand the situation, but that you're still there to support and that you're trying to come and be there for them. So I think so. And I think that kind of comes in with the question about empathy versus sympathy, just getting a little bit more of a description. Um, and that's kind of where those two worlds differ, right? So empathy is feeling with someone. It's really trying to understand where they're coming from. And then sympathy is more feeling sorry for that person. It's kind of sitting next to them and not trying to put on their feelings and just kind of patting them on the back. There's sympathy sympathy could still be a very positive thing. But I think when we're trying to connect with others and show others that we're really trying to understand them, that's where empathy is extremely important. And it kind of helps us bring the distinction between the sentence, I can't imagine how you feel about that. And then you move on with a different conversation. That's a sympathetic response. But then if you say, I can't imagine how you feel about that. I'm so happy you told me. I'm here for you. That's an empathetic response.
How do you deal with a person who just complains and doesn't want to make any changes? Is limiting contact with them the only option?
It's a tough one. So I want to ask the question first of, is the goal to get them to fix whatever's happening, or is the goal to just be there and validate them and support them? Um, I fully acknowledge that it can be very exhausting. It's a lot of emotional labor. You are not their therapist, you are not their counselor. You are not there to fix anything, but also it takes an emotional toll taking on that person's kind of emotional bandwidth, right? So if there's a time where, you're like, I've had this conversation 7 or 8 times with this person, I'm tired of hearing it. On one end, you're probably also not necessarily actively engaging anymore or actively listening anymore because you're like, I'm kind of checked out. Um, but then on the other end, if they're not, if they ask for support and your support isn't what's working with them, then there might be a time where you kind of have to put a boundary up. It really just depends on what the goal is, and what you want to get out of it. If it is something that's emotionally exhausting for you and you don't have the capacity for it, and you know that they're not going to get to a point where they're going to change their ways or change the solution or whatever, then yes, putting up a boundary might be what's necessary to protect your peace and also, help them understand that maybe they need to kind of reflect a little bit more. And there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do that. There's no right or wrong way. It's kind of tough depending on the person. But it might just be like changing the subject once they bring it up, or making an excuse to leave so that, you don't have to confront them with, hey, I'm putting up this boundary. You just kind of have your own boundary and you work with it. Or it might be a conversation of, you know, we've talked about this a lot. I really want you to know that I'm here for you and I want to support you. Um, but I feel like we're kind of going in circles and I would love to help you, but this is starting to become a bit of a cycle. If, I might have to protect my peace and we might have to move on. And how they react to it is how they react to it. It's not your responsibility how they react to it, right? But sometimes that's easier said than done, especially when it comes to personal relationships. So, just a quick summary of what we learned today. We looked at connecting and belonging and how important it is, and how it really matters at every age. But when we're looking at older adults, there's a lot of factors at play that can kind of foster a stronger sense of social isolation and loneliness. And there's ways that we can kind of break those down through those small connections. We looked at everyday ways to practice active listening. We took a look at all those little elements, and trying to bring those into our conversations. And then we looked at how those small steps really make a difference. Now, everybody has their own experience. Everybody has their own way of kind of going about in the world. Some of us are more extroverted and excited about trying new things and doing new stuff. Some of us are a little bit more introverted. Some of us are more limited by maybe we want to be that extroverted person, but maybe we're limited in certain ways. Um, I really want to try to take stock of how important it is to just find the value in the kind of power of those tiny little moments because they really add up over the day. If you just try to think or even document, if you have like a little journal or a notebook or something, and write down those small moments that made you smile or made you feel connected, and then you look at it at the end of the day, you might have a couple in there that really add up. So it's a great time to kind of take stock of those moments and try to think about ways that you can kind of develop those a little bit further. So yeah, I was talking about it a little bit earlier, but just a bit more about our active listening service and how to actually access it. So like I said, it is free for everybody. You can use the service as many times as you'd like. And it's available virtually via the phone or a video tool, whatever tool you prefer to use. You just have to tell the person that you've booked the session with, I prefer Zoom, I prefer Teams, or whatever tool that you like. Um, or you can meet in person at a cafe in Montreal, the West Island, and Istri. It's very easy to book a session with us. You just have to go on our website, ventovertea.com, and there's a big book now button right there. You just select which language you want to use the service in. It's available in French and English. And you can also select if you want the service in person or virtually. with virtual appointments, you can usually get an appointment as early as the next day. And you can book pretty much between 8 and 9 p.m. or 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. for a session. And what ends up happening when you book a session is you get randomly paired with a volunteer active listener. So you don't know who you're going to get paired with. We have volunteers from kind of a very broad range of ages. We have some listeners who are in their 20s. We have some listeners who are in their 50s and 60s, and we have some listeners in their 30s and 40s. So we kind of have a pretty wide range of listeners. So it's a nice way to kind of connect with either different generations or somebody within your generation. You never know. So it's kind of fun in that aspect. And they will reach out to you, confirm the appointment, and then they'll meet with you at the designated time. Um, and like I said, they're really there for you to connect. I see the question for those with no internet, we need a phone number, please. Okay, so with our service, we don't have a direct phone line, just for the safety of our volunteers. But if there's ever a time where you want to book a session, with the phone, I can put the phone number here and I can organize it with you. But the way it would work is you would call me, and then I would go onto our booking platform and then schedule the appointment for you. And then you would get a text message, or not a text message, you would have to get an email to confirm the appointment. That's the only thing. Um, just the nature of our service, it does require an email to confirm the appointment. We are trying to figure out ways to set ourselves up. We have worked with a couple organizations where they facilitate the sessions and book them for it. Um, but there are regular hotlines, like Megan said, where you can book a session there. You just have to call the numbers, and then you'll get connected right away. So our service is a little bit more like hands-on, one-on-one, and it does require an email to confirm the appointment, unfortunately.
Is it possible to set up Event Over Tea volunteer in remote regions if a person shows interest?
I would love that. We've been trying to find ways to get more volunteers in person. We've reached out to a lot of organizations to kind of help us understand the needs better. One thing, because our service is meant to be a confidential service, we found that sometimes it's a bit harder to like keep that confidential or anonymity between, because you're going to book a session with that one person and kind of see them over and over and over again. It kind of becomes more of a therapy versus a stranger based experience. But we're definitely open to the conversation and seeing if there's ways that we can make that happen. We do encourage volunteers from kind of across the province to provide virtual services as well. So that is also an option. And we also do active listening training for organizations. So if there's somebody on your team who maybe wants to provide this type of service, we can have a conversation and help them get trained so that they can do it. And then that way you can kind of work with your own booking system and all that. So if you'd like, you can email me. It's just marissa@ventovert.com. I'll put it in the chat. But if anybody has any questions, this is a general for everybody, all participants. If you have any questions about our service or anything, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm more than happy to kind of have the conversation and see how I can help out.
I'm wondering if there are more ways than just this that we can prevent social isolation.
Yeah, I mean, I think our community around us play a huge role in this. I think it's something that like shouldn't just be on an individual because we all have our own different barriers. And it shouldn't be just on us. I think it's really great that we have these community organizations that are putting an effort in. They've identified these needs and that they have support to be able to provide these services. And there is kind of, an understanding of being nice to one another and not brushing off people when they're trying to connect. But I would love to see a world where we kind of acknowledge this and we all kind of have our own internalized effort to support one another versus just an individual kind of ownness on it. Um, but I do think that having organizations that are able to kind of support and provide ways to break down those barriers is really helpful. If we had a lot more of that, I think it would be great. But what we have right now is also really nice. But there's always more work to do. I think that's always the case with really anything. There's always more work to do. There's always more solutions to come up with or more support that's needed.
Great. Thank you all so much for being here today. As I mentioned before, all of the information and the resources that were mentioned today are going to be sent to the coordinators at your local community organizations. So if you have any other questions, I really recommend that you reach out to that coordinator. I want to thank Flora again for her technical support today. And then on behalf of all of us, a really big thank you to Marissa. I think this was a really empowering and validating session, and we came away with a lot of very practical tips for improving our relationships with the people around us. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.